Okay, let's um, get to the Merfolk spoilers. So I'm going to try to keep this one a little bit shorter. I don't actually think I have as much to say about the Merfolk spoiled cards lately, but I clearly think that the most likely Merfolk card that was spoiled to make a substantial difference in the archetype is probably going to be the Sev Elon of Sea and Sky, the new Merfolk god. I don't think that's really surprising to many people. Um, yeah, I just thought I'd share some of my thoughts on the spoiled Merfolk cards. I do not think that these are going to make as big of an impact as Ragavan is on the Obosh Red archetype, but there's a lot to like about Sev Elon. What a interesting name that is. But yeah, so I think it's hard for me to really to really say much that Nikachu hasn't already said on his channel as far as why this card is pretty good. I do kind of wish it was 2 mana, obviously, so that I could still play Luris, but obviously this would be a little busted at 2 mana. Obviously the stats would have to be tweaked, but we got a 3 mana card, and this makes me want to play Yuri on Merfolk again. And I'll tell you why. I think this card synergizes really well with Master of Waves. That's an angle that I haven't really seen discussed as much yet. I think it's kind of obvious because obviously it has two blue. Like a lot of the other lords, it gives you basically 3 tokens off of Master of Waves. Just between the two. If you've got this and Master of Waves, you get 3 2/1 elemental tokens. And Also, obviously, if you've got like multiple Master Waves, then this becomes indestructible, and then it becomes even harder for the opponents to target your Master Waves. I think it's kind of obvious, but yeah, I think that this would push me more into like a straight mono blue type build instead of making a light splash for black. I could see myself playing Yurion in order to really get full value out of the Master of Waves synergy. It is possible that just a regular old companionless mono blue list might take better advantage of this, but I really was kind of liking the Yurion builds before I moved over to Luris. I'm definitely going to be tempted to give a try to the Yurion builds again. I might just try a companionless build here and there. We'll see. But yeah, this card basically the main reason why I think Sevillan is going to be good in Merfolk is because it draws a card whenever it attacks. I think probably most people are most excited about that ability, and for good reason. This basically allows us to pull ahead, relatively permanently, and of course with a 3/4 body, this card is a lot more resilient than Luris, for example. It's not perfect, but also also the ward ability is kind of nice. Unfortunately, it only works for other Merfolk. It doesn't work for this card itself. That would have been extra good if it had ward 1. That would have made it almost impossible actually to burn out. I shouldn't say impossible, but it would have taken like basically 2 1-mana burn spells and 4 mana, which would have been insane. But the ward 1 synergizes very well with the indestructible as long as you control 2 other Merfolk. If you slam this down on the board with like a Silver Gill Adept and like a Lord of Atlantis or something, or just a Silver Gill Adept and who knows, like a Merfolk Trickster or anything else really, then suddenly if they are tapped out, they are going to have to at least waste an extra mana on killing one of those other Merfolk, and then see if they actually can deal with Civ Yelan. Yeah. Anyway, I don't think there's much more, honestly, to say about Civ Yelan other than just that it's a really grindy card, which is really nice, especially for the type of Merfolk I like to play. It doesn't. I think Nikachu is right that this doesn't necessarily solve a lot of Merfolk's biggest problem matchups. I think basically like more board control is kind of what solves the elves and hardened scales and a lot of those toughest matchups. For that reason alone, it is possible maybe I might end up going back to Lurrus. I really think this card does have a lot of potential, but the one thing that makes it not inconceivable to me that I may actually end up going back to Lurrus is I do feel like the Lurrus versions I've been playing do shore up a lot of the worst matchups that Merfolk has, like against Elves. Recurring Ratchet Bomb is excellent. Against Hardened Scales, Recurring Ratchet Bomb is excellent. I mean, actually, you'd be surprising. Recurring Ratchet Bomb actually is a really great help to a lot of problematic matchups for Merfolk. But yeah. Anyway, so that's Civilan. I'll get to the rest in a second. Oh yeah, and I do just want to briefly say it's a legendary creature, just like Ragavan. That's kind of an issue. I think in a Yuri build, I think 4 of won't be an issue at all, because I don't think you're going to see too many anyway with 80 cards in your deck. I could see this potentially being an issue in a companionless version, but just like Ragavan, I think this card is powerful enough and really a must-kill threat enough that most likely playing 4 even in a 60 card companionless deck is going to be fine, in my opinion. I really do. I like playing 4s, as everybody knows, but there's nothing like about this card that necessarily makes me feel that I'd have to make an exception, and I do make an exception sometimes. Yeah, but you know, this card, yeah, like I said, it doesn't solve any of Merfolk's biggest problems, but obviously in the matchups where it's good, you just really want to draw it enough, and obviously if they don't kill it, you probably just pull way too far ahead with all the card draw. That realistically, probably playing 4 is fine. That being said, it does kind of bottleneck your indestructible game plan if you can't actually get enough Merfolk on the battlefield, because too many of the Merfolk are civilian. Then I could see that being a problem. In any case, probably where I'm going to start off with this is in Yuri Folk, and I definitely think 4 of in a 80 card deck shouldn't be an issue. Anyway, that is like one of the only real downsides, I think, to the card, other than the fact that obviously it doesn't have flying and it doesn't necessarily control the board. But I mean, hey, you know, we can't have literally everything. Let's get to some of the rest of the Merfolk. Tide Shaper, I think Merfolk. I think Nikachu is spot on that this card is excellent. I'm not necessarily as convinced that this is going to replace Spreading Seas, but I definitely think this is more of a main deck card, and Spreading Seas could end up becoming more of a sideboard card. That being said, I do really like my sideboard, and I think the sideboard in general is one of the most underrated parts of Magic, and a lot of times I actually like freeing up sideboard space by playing cards that are traditionally thought of as sideboard cards in the main, because that's just how important having powerful sideboard effects is to improving your overall win rate. But it's really hard to go wrong with a Tide Shaper. I mean, hey, we asked for more powerful 1-drops, and you know, ask and you shall receive. We get a deluge of you know, well, I don't know if deluge is the right term, but we definitely get a number of powerful 1-drops, particularly this and Rashid and Dockhand, which we'll get to in a minute. But yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to say much more about this than has already been said. I think most of the time we're going to want to play the kicker. That makes it a little awkward with Aether Vial, but honestly, like, you know, most of the time I think we end up playing stuff from our hand that's 1 mana anyway, unless it's like really, really early in the game, because Aether Vial is probably going to be sitting on 2 most of the time. But yeah, I actually think this card combined with Spreading Seas might actually up the Mana Screw effect. I heard Nikachu say that we could be playing Tide Shaper, Spreading Seas, you know, Seas Claim, and I forget there might be another card as well. Oh yeah, and Rashid and Dockhand, of course. But one card I keep hearing, seeing get left out of the discussion is Tectonic Edge. I'm actually not so sure we need Seas Claim anymore. I mean, the reality is, I mean, like, I don't know that we need to go full on, like, 100% Ponza and completely abandon every other strategy. But there's a lot to like, I think, about having Tide Shaper, Spreading Seas alone. I mean, just that alone could end up, you know, color screwing our opponents quite a bit. And it's worth noting that the more lands you turn into an island, the less likely they are able to deal with Tide Shaper and thereby free themselves. But if you just have Tide Shaper, Rashid and Dockhand, Spreading Seas, and Tectonic Edge, that's 16 land, you know, like mana denial cards. And the one thing I've actually found about Tectonic Edge is that it gets significantly better when you're turning their lands into islands, because it forces them to play more lands too, right into Tectonic Edge. So, you know, I might actually go there. I don't know that we need to reach for all 20 of these, you know, land mana denial effects. I think Tide Shaper, Spreading Seas, Tectonic Edge, and Rashid and Dakhand actually is a pretty powerful backbone of a very strong mana denial strategy. And the cool thing is none of those cards are particularly bad in and of themselves. Tectonic Edge is probably the weakest, but the fact that it can always tap for colorless definitely goes a long way for making sure that's not just a straight up dead card like Seas Claim. Seas Claim might even have a play still, honestly, because it synergizes pretty well with Master of Waves still. The deck might end up just becoming more of a mono blue devotion in a way type deck. There might not be much room for Merfolk anymore if you go that far in the Spreading Seas direction. But I mean, at the very least, like I said, those 16 mana denial cards, I think might give us a pretty decent game plan. So, you know, we'll see if there's anything to be said about that. But I do like cards that that have some usefulness, even if they're not necessarily doing their main thing, like Tide Shaper or Rashid and Dakhand. If they're not doing their mana denial, they're still at least Merfolk bodies. They can get pumped by Lord of Atlantis and, you know, all that good stuff. There's a lot to be said, I think, about that. I mean, obviously we got this new Affinity card. It's not a Merfolk, but, you know, is this enough to bring Affinity back? You know, who knows. Cool to see Sea Drake come back. I remember that some Legacy decks tried to make this work. I don't think paying 3 mana for a 4/3 flying with a drawback is necessarily going to set Modern ablaze, but it is kind of cool to see this again. I will just briefly say, actually, I think Lose Focus actually might be pretty decent, but obviously Counterspell coming back takes a lot of the thunder out of this card. Not necessarily for us Merfolk decks, but more for like control decks. I think this card might be somewhat underrated, and I think this is a yeah, we might end up actually seeing more of this than we might think in control decks. I personally think this is better than Mana Leak because it basically it can basically be a hard counter later in the game if you just leave up more mana. That being said, there's a pretty good chance that Logic Knot is just better because you may not have to keep a bunch of mana untapped later in the game. And anyway, back to Merfolk, which is why we're all here. Also, I just want to briefly mention Raving Visionary. I think this card is better than people are giving it credit for, but that being said, I still think it's highly unlikely this card's going to find a home in Merfolk. I've actually played Merfolk Looter sometimes. It obviously never went 5-0, and I don't think any of my lists ever published where I tried it. It always felt okay, but yeah, but it's just in Modern, actually, a lot of times I did actually feel like, I wish I could, you know, just straight up draw a card. So actually, one card that I never really got around to trying was Enclave Cryptologist. I may have tried that a few times, actually. That probably is better than Merfolk Looter. The biggest problem is obviously you can't just, you know, play it off of Violon 2. I think at least we can say Raving Visionary is probably I don't know. Yeah, the biggest problem, of course, is that you have to pay 1 to draw a card and discard a card. You know. Anyway, yeah, I don't think this card is necessarily going to see play, but I believe it or not, I might give this a try. It's just way more control-y, though. It's way going off the aggro path, and it's going way more towards. I guess I just really like Merfolk Looter back from the Static Orb Opposition Merfolk deck from way back in like the early 2000s Worlds. That was kind of like a formative deck for me in both respecting Merfolk as an archetype and just learning about competitive deck building. Period. In any case, let's go to the last card that I want to get to before the end of this video, and I basically am wrapping up here. Yeah, Rashid and Dakhand. See if this image loads anytime soon now. I don't know why it's let's try to refresh here. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I found the page, and I already had it set here to go to, and I was worried for a second that there's a problem loading the image. But yeah, we all know Rashid and Dakhand. We've seen it in the spoilers. I've already kind of touched on this, but yeah, I think this card is decent. I mean, I don't think this card is broken or anything. Again, what I like is that together with the Merfolk Tidebinder, or whatever it's called, the 1-mana 1/1 that gives turns land into an island as long as it's in play and gets +1/+1. The thing that I like about these type of cards is just that they have a strong mana denial element to it. But if for whatever reason the land denial, the mana denial part isn't really paying much dividends, they're still just Merfolk bodies. So yeah, I mean, and that literally describes Rashid and Dockhand. I don't think there's really much more to say. I love that it's a 1/2 in a world of Ren 6 and Lava Dart. I love that for sure. It's not necessarily going to fundamentally change the card too much, but I think that actually goes a long way towards actually making this have a higher floor. Yeah, actually, that's one way I like to look at this card. This card has a relatively low floor because just a 1-mana 1/1 Island Walk. And this is another thing actually I like about having both the Tidebinder and having that 1-mana 1/1 Island creating Merfolk and Spreading Seas in your deck is that even if you don't have a Lord, with both of those effects, even if tapping down their land isn't necessarily going to do much, just making Rashid and Dockhand unblockable against decks that don't naturally have an island, I think is pretty good. This card has a fairly low floor because a 1-mana 1/2 Merfolk body is never that bad. Island Walk is just icing on the cake, and in a deck that has lots of Seas effects, I think that's actually going to be a lot more relevant a lot more often than we might initially be thinking. And the card has a fairly low floor, but I think the card actually has a fairly high ceiling, because if you can really tap down their mana, then you can just get some free wins. It's kind of Blood Moon-ish, sort of like how Blood Moon can just steal some free wins with the red Obosh deck. Mana Denial is not particularly fun, but in a deck like Modern that does a lot of broken things, it is kind of, I think, a necessary evil to have in the format. Anyway, so this video is obviously not going to be 50 minutes long, so I think I'm calling it here. I don't think Merfolk is necessarily going to be catapulted into like a best deck status in the format necessarily, but I could see this becoming maybe tier 1. I don't know. That's probably kind of a hot take there, but I could see this going into tier 1 status. You never know. I think, and if it does, I actually think it's going to be more because of Rashid and Dockhand and the island, the Merfolk with the island ability. I think Mana Denial is a very underrated effect that just how powerful it isn't felt until you're actually playing against it. I do like the God of the Sea. I think that card is the most exciting. It's the card that I think fits my game plan the most. The type of card I like to play the most. But objectively speaking, if Merfolk gets catapulted into tier 1 status, it's going to be because we're all, including me, we're all severely underrating just how powerful this Mana Denial really is. We'll see. Anyway, until next time, you guys like this, comment, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for notifications. Yeah, do hit that like button, actually, if you do like this content. Please do. It's I think that'll really boost the YouTube algorithm, which is pretty sweet. Yeah, anyway, until next time, guys, let me know if I'm missing anything, if there's any other cards you guys want me to review. Yeah, take care, and have a great week, everybody.